You woke up this morning believing you were free. You made your daily choices, decided what to eat for breakfast, chose the clothes you would wear, planned your appointments. Each decision seemed genuinely yours, born from your personal will, your desires, and needs. But what if I told you that this sense of freedom you experience every moment might just be a carefully constructed illusion? What if each of these apparently free choices was already being directed by forces you don't even perceive exist? You are living, most likely, through the final days in which human freedom as we know it is still possible. And most of us don't even realize what we're losing, because this loss is happening so gradually and seductively that it appears to be progress. Consider for a moment your typical morning. You pick up your phone upon waking and begin scrolling through notifications. Every tap on the screen, every pause at a post, every movement of your eyes is being tracked, analyzed, and cataloged. An algorithm is learning not just what you like, but how you think, how you feel when you're vulnerable, when you're happy, when you're prone to making certain decisions. This system isn't just observing your choices, it's gradually shaping the very mental structure that generates those choices. It's as if every morning you wake up in a maze that subtly reorganizes itself during the night so that the paths seem familiar but actually lead to destinations that weren't exactly what you had chosen. Human freedom has always been a fragile and recent achievement in the history of our species. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in small groups where each person intimately knew all others, where individual choices were limited by immediate survival needs and ancestral traditions. The idea that each individual could determine their own destiny, choose their profession, their partner, their life philosophy, their political values, is an extraordinarily new innovation that emerged only in the last few centuries. And even then, this freedom was never absolute. It always depended on social, economic, and political structures that made it possible. What makes our historical moment unique is not that freedom is being threatened, that has always happened, but rather that for the first time in human history, the threats come from systems that know you better than you know yourself. In past dictatorships, control was exercised through brute force and crude propaganda. The totalitarian state tried to shape behavior through fear and repetition of slogans. It was a primitive method, like trying to sculpt a statue with a hammer. The new control system is more like genetic engineering of the mind, altering the DNA of our decision-making processes so subtly that we continue believing we are the ones in command. Today, artificial intelligence systems analyze billions of data points about your behavior to create a predictive model of your personality that is more accurate than the knowledge you have of yourself. These systems know which ad you're most likely to click based not just on your previous purchases, but on the speed with which you scroll the screen, the time of day you use your phone, the micro patterns of how you type. They know when you're feeling lonely, when you're insecure, when you're excited, and can present exactly the type of content that will amplify those feelings in ways that benefit whoever controls the algorithms. Most disturbing is that this system doesn't work by replacing your choices with externally imposed choices. Instead, it works by subtly modifying the mental environment in which your choices are made, so that you continue feeling that you're choosing freely, but within parameters that have been carefully designed. It's like living in an aquarium where you can swim freely, but within invisible limits that determine where the current takes you. You experience movement and autonomy, but your trajectory is being constantly adjusted by forces operating beyond your conscious perception. Think about how your political opinions form today. You probably believe you arrived at your convictions through rational analysis, personal experience, and careful reflection. But social media algorithms for years have been carefully curating the type of information that reaches you, creating confirmation bubbles so sophisticated that even contradictory information is presented in a way that reinforces your pre-existing beliefs. It's not that someone is telling you what to think. It's something much more subtle. Someone is controlling which thoughts have the opportunity to arise in your mind. The engineering of consent we live with today makes 20th century propaganda methods seem brutally primitive. Edward Bernays, considered the father of public relations, used psychological techniques to influence mass behavior, but was limited by the communication media of his time. Today, each person carries a device that allows personalized psychological intervention in real time. It's no longer about convincing a homogeneous mass through single messages, but about micro-influencing each individual with surgical precision based on their specific psychological profile. This transformation is happening simultaneously on multiple fronts. At the economic level, surveillance capitalism has transformed personal data into the most valuable commodity on the planet. Companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon aren't just selling products or services, they're selling predictions about future human behavior. And to create these predictions, they need not just to observe behavior, but to influence and direct it. Your economic value isn't just in what you buy, but in your predictability as a consumer, as a voter, as a service user. At the political level, democracies around the world are discovering that digital manipulation of public opinion can be more effective than traditional campaigns. When algorithms can identify undecided voters with more than 90% accuracy and target them with personalized messages that trigger their specific fears or hopes, the very nature of the democratic process changes fundamentally. We're no longer talking about candidates trying to convince informed citizens through rational arguments, but about psychological persuasion systems that operate below the threshold of consciousness. Biology is becoming yet another front in this battle for human autonomy. Emerging brain-computer interface technologies promise to connect our brains directly to the internet, allowing instant access to any information. It seems liberating, but it also means that the distinction between your thoughts and externally inserted information could disappear completely. When you can search for anything just by thinking about it, how do you differentiate between a genuine insight and an implanted suggestion? When memories can be edited or false memories inserted, what happens to the sense of personal identity that depends on the continuity of our experiences? What makes this situation especially insidious is that each step of this transformation is presented as an improvement in our quality of life. Apps that track every aspect of our health promise to help us live better. Virtual assistants that monitor our conversations promise to make our lives more convenient. Recommendation systems that analyze our behavior patterns promise to connect us with exactly what we need at the right moment. And in many respects, these promises are fulfilled. The question is, what is the real price of this convenience? We are witnessing the birth of a new form of government that doesn't need to use force or explicit coercion because it operates through modifying the very structures of human desire and motivation. It's a system that works not by repressing freedom, but by redefining it. Freedom comes to mean the ability to choose between pre-selected options within a system that constantly shapes what kind of choice seems attractive or possible. Modern neuroscience has revealed that most of our decisions are made unconsciously, seconds before we become aware that we've decided something. Our sense of free will may be largely a retrospective illusion, a story we tell ourselves about decisions that were actually determined by neurological processes we don't control. If this is true, then perhaps our concern about freedom is misdirected from the start. Perhaps we're not losing something we actually possessed, but just discovering the limits that always existed. But there's a crucial difference between the natural unconscious determinants of our behavior and the artificial determinants created by technological systems. The former evolved over millions of years to help us survive and thrive in ancestral environments. The latter are designed by corporations and governments with specific objectives that may or may not align with our well-being. When an algorithm manipulates your evolutionary instincts to keep you scrolling endlessly through a newsfeed, it's hijacking mental systems that exist to help us make adaptive decisions about our environment. I want to pause for a moment to ask, have you noticed how difficult it has become to be alone with your own thoughts? How even a few minutes without external stimulation seems unbearable? This growing inability to tolerate mental silence isn't accidental. It's the result of systems designed to fragment our attention and create dependence on constant external stimuli. When you can no longer access your own thoughts and feelings without technological mediation, in what sense are you still free? Share in the comments. I notice my dependence on external stimuli when your honesty can help others recognize similar patterns in their own lives. Education, which traditionally was the bulwark of preparation for free citizenship, is being fundamentally reorganized by these same systems. Children grow up in environments where every interaction with information is mediated by algorithms that learn how to capture and maintain attention. They're developing brains that are optimized for quick response to intermittent rewards, not for deep reflection or sustained critical thinking. An entire generation is being cognitively shaped by systems whose primary goal is to maximize engagement, not develop wisdom or intellectual autonomy. The concept of privacy, fundamental to individual freedom, is becoming not just technically impossible, but culturally irrelevant. Younger generations grow up sharing the most intimate details of their lives online, not just by choice, but because digital platforms make sharing the only way to participate in social life. Privacy begins to seem antisocial, suspicious, as if having thoughts and experiences that aren't publicly accessible were a form of betrayal of the ideal of total transparency. But perhaps the most profound change is happening in our relationship with truth and knowledge. For millennia, humans developed methods to distinguish between reliable and unreliable information. Tradition, authority, direct experience, scientific method, public debate. Today, the line between fact and fiction is being deliberately blurred by systems that have discovered that emotionally charged information, regardless of its truthfulness, generates more engagement than factual information. We are entering an era of personalized truth where each person can inhabit a completely different informational reality from others, but equally convincing. When there is no longer a common foundation of shared facts, the very possibility of rational democratic debate disappears. How can you exercise political freedom when you can no longer distinguish between information and disinformation, when your perceptions about reality are constantly shaped by algorithms whose workings are completely opaque? Artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming better than humans at many tasks that traditionally defined our humanity: creativity, ethical judgment, even emotional intimacy. Chatbots can already pass for convincing therapists, romantic companions, spiritual advisors. When machines can perfectly simulate any type of human relationship, what happens to our need for one another? And when we no longer need each other, what incentive do we have to develop the political and moral virtues that freedom in society requires? We are approaching a tipping point where the choice between freedom and security, between autonomy and convenience, may no longer be available. Artificial intelligence systems integrated into all aspects of our infrastructure promise to optimize everything: traffic flow, resource distribution, even personal relationships. The efficiency these systems can provide is too tempting to refuse, especially when we face global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and economic inequality. But total optimization is the opposite of freedom. Freedom includes the right to be inefficient, to make choices that aren't objectively better, to value things that can't be quantified. When every aspect of human life is optimized by algorithms, we are essentially outsourcing our agency to machines that, however sophisticated, operate according to criteria we cannot understand or contest. The question isn't whether we should resist all technology or return to some pre-digital golden age that probably never existed. The question is whether we can develop technology that expands human autonomy instead of diminishing it, that increases our capacity for genuine choice instead of creating illusions of choice within predetermined parameters. This will require fundamental changes in how we think about data ownership, algorithmic transparency, digital rights. We need new institutions that can regulate the power of tech corporations without suffocating innovation. We need educational systems that teach not just how to use technology, but how to think critically about its effects on our cognition and society. More importantly, we need to recover practices and values that reconnect us with our own agency. This might mean deliberately creating spaces of silence and reflection, developing deep attention skills, cultivating relationships that aren't mediated by digital platforms. It might mean learning to tolerate uncertainty and ambiguity instead of always seeking the optimized answer that an algorithm can provide. The irony is that our obsession with efficiency and optimization may be costing us precisely what we most value about humans: our capacity to surprise, to change our minds, to grow in unpredictable ways. The qualities that make human life rich and meaningful are precisely those that are hardest to encode in algorithms: spontaneity, creativity, the capacity to love in ways that defy all logic. Perhaps the path to preserving human freedom isn't to resist change, but to participate consciously in its direction. If we're going to live in a world increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence, we need to ensure that this shaping happens according to genuinely chosen human values, not simply imposed by those with the greatest technological or economic power. This means all of us need to become more digitally literate, not just in the sense of knowing how to use apps, but in the sense of understanding how these systems work and how they affect us. We need to demand transparency about how algorithms make decisions that impact our lives. We need to create social and political spaces where these issues can be debated democratically. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By subscribing to this channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways to live amid the transformations we're witnessing. The future of human freedom won't be determined by inevitable technological developments, but by the choices we make today about what kind of society we want to build. We still have time to choose a path that preserves what is most valuable in the human experience. But this window of opportunity may not remain open indefinitely. The question isn't whether technology will change our nature, that's already happening. The question is whether we will participate consciously in that change or simply let it happen to us. The time to awaken to these realities is now, while we still have the capacity to shape our own evolution. Every moment of true attention, every choice made with full consciousness, every act of genuine human connection is a small act of resistance against the homogenization of our experience. Together, we can imagine and create a future where technology serves human flourishing instead of subordinating it to goals that aren't ours. This may be our last chance to deliberately choose what kind of human beings we want to become. Let's use it well. wants us to censor our users. And this is, I think, deliberate obfuscation, deliberate confusion. The issue is not what the users are doing. The issue is what the algorithms of the company are doing. If somebody publishes a hate-filled conspiracy theory, at least my personal opinion is that except in very extreme circumstances, it should not be censored and the person should not be punished. The problem is not with the human being who published this hate-filled post. The problem is that the Facebook algorithm or the TikTok algorithm now takes this post and deliberately shows it to millions of other people because it assumes that it will increase engagement. This is the problem.